People always say you can feel when something in your life is about to snap. But no one ever tells you how eerily normal the moment is right before everything falls apart. That afternoon, something told me to come home early. A feeling. A pull. A quiet alarm ringing somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't know why, only that I needed to walk through that door. So when Angela stepped in through the garage and spotted me sitting at the kitchen table, barely 10 feet away, she froze like she'd just seen a ghost. "Chris, why are you home?" she asked, her voice tight, almost cracking under the weight of her own shock. But it wasn't her reaction that caught my attention. It was the shadow behind her. A younger man, tall, sharply dressed, visibly uncomfortable, hovered in the doorway, half hidden behind her body like he wished he could melt into the wall. Angela, my wife of 28 years, still looked stunning. 5 feet 9 inches, fit, auburn hair cascading past her shoulders, wearing a crisp white blouse showing just a hint too much, paired with a black linen skirt that hugged her curves and those flawless legs. She always dressed well for work, but today she looked like someone trying very, very hard to impress. Her question hung in the air, absurd and insulting. I stared at her calmly, letting the silence twist, before answering in a voice so cool it made her flinch. "I live here. Why wouldn't I be home?" A flicker of irritation flashed across her face, something I'd been seeing more and more lately, an impatience she couldn't quite hide. Then came the second question. Why was I home at 3:30 p.m.? Funny how quickly the simple things become suspicious. I often joked that I had loved Angela since the moment we met. She was the administrative assistant for 4 top executives, and I was visiting their office for meetings. She was the one who escorted me to the senior suite, and by the time she walked me back toward the lobby, I'd gathered the courage to ask her to dinner. That was the beginning of everything. But today, everything felt reversed, as if she was escorting me out of my own life. Her companion stepped forward, finally emerging from behind her. I expected arrogance, a smirk, some kind of puffed-up confidence. But instead, I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes. Something had already gone off script for them. I glanced between the two and calmly asked why she was home more than an hour earlier than usual. Angela and I had been inseparable since that first date. For nearly 3 decades, I had poured every ounce of myself into our marriage and our family. I built a successful insurance brokerage, helped her through school until she earned her bachelor's degree, and watched her rise into a leadership position in HR. So the shift I'd seen in her recently, coldness, distance, secrecy, hadn't gone unnoticed. And today it was all about to unravel. I leaned back, gave her that crooked half grin she knew well, and said softly, "You didn't answer me. Why are we home early?" The word we made her tense. Taking charge of the moment, the younger man stepped forward and introduced himself with a stiff handshake I didn't take. "I'm Michael Browner," he said. "I'm the new attorney at Kellerman & Sons. Angela and I have been working closely together." I cut him off with a low, steady growl. "I know exactly who you are. And I know exactly what you are." For the first time, I saw true concern ripple across Angela's face. She winced when I said her nickname, one only people closest to her ever used. The same nickname she once said she'd never allow anyone to use disrespectfully. "So tell me," I muttered, pointing directly at Michael, "why am I letting this intruder stand in my home and call you that? Why am I tolerating him breathing the same air as me?" Angela shifted in place, clearly thrown. She was a meticulous planner, every detail of every scenario always accounted for. I knew she and her little sidekick had rehearsed whatever speech they came here to give me. In her mind, I was already the broken, betrayed husband who would quietly submit. One look at Michael's stiff posture, though, and I could tell his nerves were fraying. I almost laughed imagining how tightly clenched he must have been. The tension thickened in the room like fog. I inhaled deeply, twice, 3 times, pushing the rage down into a locked corner of my chest. If I snapped now, their plan would win. No, I wanted my moment. I stood up with deliberate calm. "How about we get some drinks?" I suggested. "All of us. Then we'll talk." Angela asked for a quiet glass of wine. Michael hesitated before answering, saying Angela had mentioned my love for bourbon and craft beers. I nodded slowly, rising from the table and walking to the family room bar. As I stepped out of view, I heard them whispering urgently, their voices low and frantic. Good. Let them panic. A few minutes later, I returned. They were seated together on the sofa, too close. I handed Angela her Merlot and passed Michael a tulip glass filled with amber ale before taking my seat in the armchair across from them. We exchanged a small, tense toast. Michael studied his drink carefully, swirling it, sniffing it, then commenting on its complexity before asking what brand it was. I casually replied, "Pabst Blue Ribbon." His expression darkened instantly. Angela's confusion deepened as she reminded me that I'd once claimed PBR was worse than donkey urine. She paused mid-sentence when she noticed me laughing. She scolded me, saying I was being rude and dismissive during a conversation that was supposed to be calm. I smiled at her. "Oh, sweetheart, this conversation hasn't even started yet." She flinched. Michael tried jumping in by calling me Chris again. I stopped him cold. "It's Mr. Harrington," I said. "Actually, sir might be even better for you." He froze. I turned sharply toward Angela. "So," I said, "what exactly did you want to talk about?" Michael opened his mouth, but I cut him off instantly. "I'm talking to my wife. You can sit there, enjoy that complex beer and stay silent." Angela's anger flared. "You need to stop acting like this," she snapped. I pretended to consider her words. Then I asked with chilling calm, "Is what I'm doing worse than what you've been doing for the past 5 or 6 weeks?" Her face paled. Michael held his breath. I locked eyes with her. "What hurts more?" I asked. "The fact you slept with someone else, or the fact you thought I was stupid enough not to notice?" Angela stared at me stunned. Then, in a trembling voice, she said she'd received an anonymous email, one claiming I was cheating. It included photos of me at a picnic in Middlewoods Park, hand in hand with another woman. I couldn't help but interrupt. "So what now? You want a divorce?" "No," she cried, leaning forward, elbows on her knees, desperate. "I love you. I don't want that. What happened with Michael was nothing but a short-term mistake." She explained he was new in town, lonely, and she thought he'd find a real girlfriend soon. She apologized, saying things had gotten out of control, and insisted she wanted our marriage, the monogamous, committed version. But then she added something that twisted my stomach. "A divorce doesn't fit into the plan for my future." She begged me to stop, insisting this was just a single fling, a little thrill. Nothing more. Something she just wanted to try. Angela tried to reassure me with a soft voice, insisting that what happened with Michael had been a moment of weakness, something she swore had never taken place before and something she promised would be finished soon. She vowed it would never, ever happen again. I raised my bourbon, took a slow sip, and let the silence sharpen the edges of the room. Only then did I respond, calm but cutting. I told her that her promises meant absolutely nothing anymore, and that deep down, everyone in that room knew the truth. She was lying. Before she could protest, I pushed further. Why should I believe this was her first affair? Why not the 5th, or the 50th? Her face tightened as I reminded her of the decades we spent building a life, a home, a family. Kelly was married now, ready to start her own family. This chapter of our lives was supposed to be the beginning of peace, travel, and a beautiful retirement together. I told her that a few years from now, her fling with Michael wouldn't be a footnote in our life, it would simply be forgotten. And with that, I stood up without asking if anyone wanted a refill and walked straight to the den to top off my glass again, fully aware that my lack of courtesy burned both of them. When I returned, they were huddled close together, whispering like two kids caught doing something they shouldn't. Michael, mofo, as my mind now labeled him, cleared his throat and asked if he could speak. I allowed it with a disgusted wave. After fumbling to gather his thoughts, he tried to defend himself. He explained that yes, Angela was right. Their connection was just a temporary fling. He said he regretted involving himself with a married woman and insisted he'd never done anything like this before. He praised Angela's qualities as if that would soften the blow. Then he pivoted, suddenly offering me life advice of all things, telling me not to let decades of marriage go to waste over one mistake. He even brought up the prenup. According to him, it was old, outdated, and probably unenforceable now. He claimed there was no hard proof of infidelity. I stared at him, wondering how Angela had fallen so far that she would let this man advise her. When he finished his little legal lecture, I turned back to Angela and asked what her plan was. After a moment of silence, she finally admitted it. She and Michael were going away for the weekend, together. She laid out their itinerary like it was nothing. She'd stay at his apartment tonight. Tomorrow morning they'd leave for New York City, stay 2 nights, and she'd return Sunday afternoon. Hearing my wife casually tell me the details of a romantic weekend with another man was like being punched by someone you trust. Even though I already knew every detail, hearing it from her still gutted me. I told her how deeply it hurt, how every memory of our favorite NYC weekends, the Broadway shows, concerts, breathtaking views, all felt stained now. I looked into her eyes hoping she could see the sadness, not the anger. She felt it. I could tell. But the voices in my head were louder, telling me to finally end this. I turned to Mofo. "What does your wife think about you sleeping with mine?" I asked bluntly. Angela snapped at me to stop. She explained that Michael was a widower. His wife died years ago. Even he seemed embarrassed by her tone. I smirked. The difference between him and Angela was starting to shine through. Then I asked about his late wife. Michael confirmed it quietly. I reached beside my chair for a manila folder and opened it. On the first page was everything about Dr. Cynthia Browner, his wife. She was an ER surgeon in Detroit, had 2 daughters, and moved to Connecticut right after her kids finished school so the family could stay close. Angela's shock was priceless. She stammered, asking if I had lied to her. I couldn't help bursting into laughter. The irony, a cheater and a liar accusing me of dishonesty. Michael reached out, holding Angela's hand, murmuring apologies, confessing his feelings for her as if I'd vanished completely from the room. It was sickening. He spoke about wanting a future with her while holding her hand right in front of me. Angela hesitated. Then she turned to me and promised she'd cut things off with him and go back to being the loving wife she believed she had always been. My heart dropped even further. Watching them talk, watching my world collapse, felt unreal. I finally interrupted them. I asked for their attention. Just 30 minutes. 30 minutes to say what I needed to say. They shared unsure glances but eventually agreed and sat down. I grabbed the remote, opened Zoom on the TV, something I had gotten very good at during the pandemic, and greeted Peter and Lou as their faces appeared on screen. Angela froze. So did Michael. I introduced Lou Beard, my new divorce attorney, who had been waiting for this moment. Lou took control immediately. He addressed Angela formally as Mrs. Harrington and informed her he was representing me. He told her divorce papers had already been filed. She had a short window to secure her own lawyer or risk court consequences. He then dropped the bomb. We had concrete, documented proof of her affair collected by a private investigator. Every detail, every outing, every lie. Their faces went pale as reality crashed down. When Lou finished, I placed another thick manila folder on the coffee table. The thud made them both jump. Inside was a copy of the divorce petition and the full PI report. As Michael reached out to look at it, Angela's eyes darted between me and the TV. I continued, calm and cold. We would be enforcing the prenuptial agreement. Every revision had been updated, notarized, and signed by Angela every 2 years for nearly 3 decades. The agreement was solid. Ironclad. Then I delivered the final blow. At the board meeting last night, the directors of Harrington Brokerage voted unanimously to remove Angela from the company. Her corporate privileges were terminated. The company car, the credit cards, the phone, the memberships, everything would be returned within the next 24 hours. In addition to everything already laid out, I explained that all joint credit cards were being canceled immediately, and every shared financial account would be frozen. Each step fully aligned with the terms of our prenuptial agreement. Then we moved on to the asset division, an 80-20 split heavily in my favor, including full ownership of the house. I requested expedited eviction and made it clear Angie would have 30 days to remove her personal belongings. There would be no alimony, no support, and more claims would follow once her attorney reviewed the paperwork. Lou finished by asking if he'd overlooked anything. I told him he covered everything perfectly and thanked him for the precision. As soon as the screen went black, Angela shot up from the couch. "Wait, bring them back. I still have questions." I shook my head. "That's not how this works. If you have questions, hire your own lawyer." Her frustration exploded and she threatened to destroy me. I turned to Michael with a smirk and asked him, as if he were still pretending to be a legal mind, what he thought her chances were now. He stayed silent. That silence alone made Angela collapse back into the cushions, her confidence draining out of her. I couldn't help smiling as I lifted the remote again. The look on her face was priceless. The next Zoom call started. "Jake, can you hear me?" I asked. His face appeared on the screen, pinched with annoyance. He said he only had a few minutes due to a conference call, so he'd get straight to the point. Michael Browner was fired. Effective immediately. His personal belongings were already being removed from his office and placed in the lobby. He had 24 hours to retrieve them before they'd be thrown out. No recommendation. No second chance. Nothing. I watched Angela's expression freeze. Fear began to drip down her spine like ice water. Her boss, someone she'd respected for nearly 3 decades, was now speaking slowly, each word a blow she couldn't dodge. Jake addressed her next. Despite his disappointment in her behavior, he acknowledged her 29 years of loyal service. Then he delivered the real hit. Her position in Hartford was being eliminated. She could accept a similar role in Albany, New York. 1 week to decide. 30 days to relocate. The screen went dark again. Angela broke. Tears burst out of her, while Michael slumped into the couch like he had been gutted. I looked at him deliberately, letting my smirk widen. He saw it, and anger flooded into his eyes. He was younger, stronger, taller, but also, unfortunately for him, dumb as a pile of bricks. Just as he was about to let his rage boil over, I lifted the remote one more time. The 4th Zoom meeting began. "Dr. Browner? Can you hear me?" Everything went still. Michael's entire body locked. Angela froze beside him. A beautiful blonde woman filled the screen, and she wasn't smiling. Cynthia, his wife. She calmly informed Michael that she had filed for divorce and he would be served soon. She was staying in Michigan with the kids and had already secured her job at the hospital. Michael panicked, begging her to reconsider, claiming the affair meant nothing and could be fixed. The disgust on Cynthia's face was unmistakable. Then she delivered the final blow. She had discovered a long list of his previous affairs, job losses, repeated betrayals, and a trail of women, including several of Angela's own colleagues. Angela didn't say a word. She couldn't. Cynthia laughed at the idea of any explanation and told Michael he was banned from her home. She needed his address so she could send the rest of his belongings. When the screen faded to black, Michael snapped and lunged into a threat. Instinct hit me fast. I reached down, drew my Colt .45 and leveled it at him. He stumbled back like his knees had gone soft. I didn't shake. Not once. I gave him a choice: leave or stay completely silent. He chose silence. When I turned back, Angela's face was soaked, trembling, devastated. It stirred a strange mix inside me, empathy tangled with cold determination. Between sobs, she confessed she'd been seeing a counselor for 2 weeks. She groaned, commenting bitterly that she was the one in therapy even though she was the one who caused all this. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. "I know," I said. "The irony is unbelievable." Then I told her what Dr. Waters, her therapist, once asked me. "Do you understand why they say love is blind?" The question haunted me. It forced me to admit how my love for Angela had blinded me, completely. Blinded me enough to excuse behavior that deserved none. Despite everything, I told her the truth. I had loved her more than she would ever be loved by anyone else. She cried harder. She said she needed Dr. Waters, someone she could trust and talk to after drowning in betrayal and humiliation. She was desperate to heal, to move forward, to rebuild her dignity. Angela explained that she had told Dr. Waters her plans for the day. Her therapist approved the first 3 Zoom meetings as healthy closure, but she warned against the 4th. She believed it would be too emotionally destructive, too triggering, too damaging to Angela's progress. And she was right. The next meeting would hurt. It would hurt me. It would destroy Angela. But I didn't care. Holding the remote for the fourth time, I lifted it slowly. Angela shrank back into the couch, panic spiraling in her eyes. And I pressed the button. I lifted the remote, aimed it at the TV, and pressed the button. In an instant, every head in the room snapped toward the screen. The moment the face appeared, Angie's entire expression collapsed. She let out a broken, trembling sound as if the air had been punched out of her lungs. Then Chris's daughter, Kelly, appeared. Her voice was soft, filled with pain, as she spoke to her father with affection. He answered her with the same warmth, and that's when Angie exploded, crying out in disbelief, demanding to know how Chris could possibly treat her so cruelly. Kelly didn't even hesitate. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. She calmly revealed that she had overheard Angie's late-night conversation with her boyfriend, the secret calls, the plans, the betrayal. She said she felt nothing but disappointment and disgust, calling her mother's behavior pitiful, almost grotesque. Angie tried to jump in with excuses, reaching for the closest justification she could grab, but Kelly didn't move an inch. She told her mother flatly that everything she had done was selfish, self-centered, and destructive. Desperate, Angie shifted the tone, confessing how lonely she had been, how much she missed Kelly since she moved away. On the screen, Kelly's expression twisted with confusion. "Are you seriously blaming me for your behavior?" she asked. Angie shook her head frantically, insisting that wasn't what she meant, begging Kelly to come to Boston so they could talk face to face. But Kelly refused. She said Angie had already made plans with her new man, along with their little romantic getaway near Cape Cod. Kelly said she had no desire to join that mess, especially now with something big happening in her own life. Then she revealed it. She was pregnant. She wanted to celebrate with people who brought love, warmth, and positivity, not the chaos that Angie had allowed to swallow her entire life. Angie tried one last time to pull rank as a mother, demanding an invitation, insisting her authority still meant something. Kelly calmly shut her down. She wanted peace, not another emotional battlefield. For the fourth time that day, the screen flickered to black. Angie sat frozen, crushed, silently falling apart. I got to my feet. Without letting anyone notice, I slid my pistol into the back of my waistband. Then I spoke. "I'm heading out for dinner. I'll be back in 2 hours. I turned to Angie. "Pack your things. All of them. When I return, you're not coming back in. Not until the court responds to my divorce filing, which should take about a week." Then I faced Mofo directly, my voice low, calm, and deadly. "You've got 3 days to get out of this state. If you're still here on Monday, things won't end well for you." I reached for the front door, paused, and glanced over my shoulder at the 2 broken figures behind me. "The weekend's supposed to be beautiful in New York," I said quietly. "Shame you won't be here to enjoy it." Second story. My name is Jim Reynolds. I'm 56 now, 5'8", still in decent shape, and for the past 22 years, I believed I had married my soulmate, Kelly. She's 45, blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'2", built in a way that made every moment of intimacy feel like falling in love all over again. I never held back affection, even when she stopped showing as much in return. Before any of this, I spent 8 hard years in special forces straight out of high school, handling explosives, surviving chaos, followed by 6 more years earning an engineering degree. Eventually, I built my own construction company, which grew into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Most people don't know anything about my military service. That part of my life almost destroyed me. 4 years of counseling kept me from collapsing under the weight of demons I still don't talk about. I've had my pilot's license even longer than all of that, but Kelly never once trusted me enough to fly with me. But I loved her from the moment I met her. I married her 2 years later. Her maiden name was Moore. Yes, those Moores. Old money. Her family descended from Richard Moore of the Mayflower. They never saw me as anything more than hired help. Still, I gave her everything. A huge Cambridge home, 4-car garage, a BMW. We had 2 kids, or so I thought, a 21-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter, both in college. I even bought them each new BMWs while I drove a decade-old GMC pickup. About 6 years ago, their behavior changed. Slowly, then suddenly. They stopped listening to me, mocked me, treated me like I didn't exist. 8 years back, I hired a man named John, thought he was my best friend. The kids adored him. A little too much, I later learned. One day, Kelly forgot to close her email. Curiosity got the better of me, and my world collapsed. She had hated me from the start. Her family did too. Worse, the kids weren't biologically mine, they were John's. They had known for years. John had known Kelly long before I hired him. They'd been laughing at me behind my back. And they weren't done. Kelly's prenup, forced on me by her father, had a ticking clock, 25 years. After that, it expired. We were 2.5 years away. And the prenup stated that a cheating spouse walks away with nothing. John, the kids, Kelly, even her father, they were all waiting for her to cross that finish line. Then John would swoop in, take over my company, and they would strip me of everything. Fortunately, I wasn't alone. Kevin, a trusted friend from my military unit, connected me with Paul, an expert in surveillance and digital security. Paul set up a system that forwarded every email from Kelly and the kids straight to a private account. The entire house was wired. I could hear every call, see every plan, learn every lie. Kevin kept me from pulling the trigger, literally. He told me to fight smarter, take their money, expose their shame, destroy the legacy they were building on my humiliation. Over the next 1.5 years, I played the perfect husband, pretended nothing was wrong, held back affection, gave just enough intimacy to twist the knife emotionally, always when I knew John wasn't around. Privately, I met with a competitor, someone honest, someone who hated my father-in-law as much as I did. I arranged to sell the company quietly and safely long before their plan could unfold. My lawyers helped me set up private accounts, protected assets, even convinced Kelly and the kids to switch to leased cars instead of buying new. They loved the idea. It saved me money and tied them to paperwork they didn't understand. I packed slowly, quietly, box by box, storage unit by storage unit. People laughed at me, sometimes to my face, sometimes behind my back. But they had no idea I already knew everything. And soon, they would realize I wasn't the fool they thought I was. I casually told Kelly that it might be smarter for us to start filing taxes separately, and that putting the house entirely under her name would make everything easier. She didn't question it for a second. Her family practically celebrated the idea, believing it was the perfect setup for her to secure the house in a future divorce. My new lawyers also pushed this strategy, not to help her but to shield my credit from the wreckage I knew was coming. She wanted several home upgrades, including her dream, an in-ground pool. I nodded, told her to go ahead, and watched her excitement bloom. The second mortgage, naturally, had to be in her name since the deed was now hers alone. Half of that money went straight into the renovations she begged for. The other half, it quietly slid into a private account she knew nothing about. Not once did she notice. I continued to pay the bills, all while shifting beneficiaries on my insurance so that if something happened to me, every cent went to charities, not to her, not to the kids, not to anyone who betrayed me. In silence, I sold my company. Nobody suspected a thing. The new owners agreed to keep every employee, except John and the little group he'd infected. They were out. Within a year, every piece of my plan was perfectly aligned. Then I made my next move. I treated the whole family, yes, including the in-laws and my ex-best friend John, to a 2-week European vacation. They laughed at me behind my back, of course. I knew they would. But it didn't matter. Kelly paid for the entire trip herself, clueless that she was financing her own disaster. Meanwhile, I purchased 150 acres of untouched Alaskan wilderness. Hidden. Accessible only by plane. My pilot's license, something Kelly never respected or trusted enough to indulge, became my personal escape route. I hired a company to build a raised cabin and a shelter for the aircraft. And while construction progressed, I also bought a second property in Fairbanks with a huge barn-like garage, a place where I could park a motorhome and vanish into the background whenever I wanted. A military buddy of mine who despises my in-laws almost as much as I do, helped register the motorhome under his name. I paid him generously along with the others who helped me. Every one of them earned it. Kelly and her family assumed I was as blind as ever. Her emails made that painfully obvious. They believed I couldn't survive without them. So I pulled all financial support. I stopped paying the mortgage, the utilities, the car payments, all of it. Every bill was now in Kelly's name. I even created a P.O. box under her name and rerouted all the mail so she'd never suspect what was happening. When the divorce finally hit, her credit would be scorched beyond repair, and she'd have no way of blaming me. As for alimony, with no official income and unemployment on record, she wouldn't get a penny. Every cent from the company sale was already offshore. On paper, it looked like I had lost everything. And then came the last stage. I told them a company emergency meant I couldn't travel with them to Europe. I'd join them later, I said. They barely reacted. In fact, they seemed relieved I wouldn't be there. The night before they left, I made sure Kelly would remember me. For once, I crossed boundaries she had long denied me. It started passionately and ended with her angry and sore. Too bad for John, who for years enjoyed privileges she refused me. The morning they left, I swung into action. I returned to the house, left the doors wide open, and called Paul, my surveillance expert. He retrieved every camera, every recording device, everything. I paid a moving company in cash to take all my belongings to Alaska. Clothes, tools, fishing gear, and my military weapons secured in storage. I left every piece of furniture behind, every sentimental object they never appreciated. Nothing pointed to Alaska. Not a hint. My son Mike never liked hunting or fishing with me, so he had no clue where I usually disappeared to. Perfect cover. I kept my phone active so Kelly wouldn't get suspicious, left it with a colleague and told him to ignore her calls but use it for a month if he needed to. Then I drove to my in-laws' house, used my spare keys, turned on every light, and logged into Mike's laptop. On a local college forum, I posted an announcement for a massive week-long keg party at their house. I knew exactly what chaos would follow. Next, I shut down every bank account and canceled every credit card linked to either of us. Roughly $50,000 evaporated from their reach. I sold my truck. 3 days later, I quietly crossed the country, enjoying my drive like a man reborn. Only cash. No paper trail. From Bellingham, Washington, I boarded a ferry to Valdez, then traveled up to Fairbanks. Meanwhile, Kelly and her family returned from Europe, only to find their homes trashed, their credit ruined, their utilities cut, and their cars repossessed. And not one of them noticed I was gone until the police, not the family, began asking questions. I gave my attorney full power of attorney for the divorce and told them I'd reach out in 2 weeks. No location. No details. On Monday morning, the Infidelity divorce papers landed in Kelly's hands. I had hoped to sue John for alienation of affection, but Massachusetts law protected corrupt politicians and cheating spouses. John and his little crew lost their jobs anyway. Kelly's life fell apart instantly. Overdue taxes, 2 mortgages she couldn't pay, credit collectors hunting her, and her precious home destroyed. She, her kids, and even John were forced to move into her parents' hotel. From BMWs to cheap rentals. From entitled wealth to scrambling for basic survival. They hired private investigators, begged lawyers to stall the divorce, but nothing worked. The case blew up publicly. DNA test results, explicit videos, recordings, every dirty secret her family hid came pouring out. Their plan to steal my company? Exposed. Their political bribery? Exposed. Their hatred for the middle class? Exposed. Even the judge assigned to the case had to recuse himself once footage surfaced showing him pocketing bribes. 5 years passed. When I finally returned to Boston for old business, I went to a restaurant I knew her family loved. They walked past me without a flicker of recognition. My long gray hair and beard helped, but so did the peace in my eyes. I asked the waiter to send a bottle of champagne to their table. They looked like they had aged 20 years. And then Kelly saw me. Her face twisted. "Oh my God, you son of a..." She stood and pointed at me, screaming my name. John lunged at me. 1 punch. Out cold. His son moved next and I handled him just as quickly. Kelly shoved herself toward me, spitting accusations, blaming me for ruining her family, as if she hadn't orchestrated the entire thing. The police arrived and arrested me, but the waiter had already called my lawyer. Surveillance footage showed the truth. I was calm, polite, in full self-defense. I walked free. Later, Kelly called my hotel. She wanted a conversation. I agreed, only in the lobby, only where everything could be recorded. She sat across from me, eyes full of resentment and confusion. "Why did you do all of this to us?" she demanded. I stared at her, stunned. She still didn't understand. After everything, she truly thought she was the one in control. "I knew," I said quietly. "I knew everything. Your plan, the affair, the late-night emails, all of it. And while you were playing your little game, I was already 3 steps ahead. I beat you to the finish line." Her face shifted, shock, then panic, then something like guilt that came far too late. She admitted it. All of it. She said she enjoyed manipulating me in the beginning, enjoyed the secret thrill of pulling strings with John, controlling the house, the conversations, me. And then she admitted the part that sealed her fate. She didn't divorce me because staying with me meant eventually she'd get everything. That was all I needed to hear. I stood up, ended the conversation, walked away, leaving her sitting there, exposed, speechless, small. The next day I flew back to Alaska, back to my cabin, my land, my solitude, back to a life untouched by her chaos. And I left the 2 of them exactly where they belonged, drowning in the wreckage they built with their own hands. Credit destroyed, money gone, reputation in ashes, pride shattered beyond repair. A far cleaner victory than the violence I once imagined, and a far more permanent one. If you're drawn to stories where betrayal meets consequence, make sure to subscribe to Dark Infidelity Stories, where every lie leaves a shadow and every ending hits harder than the last. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support the channel and keep these dark stories coming.